Welcome back to another episode of Women in Focus. Our woman in focus today is a very smart woman. She knows numbers. She knows she is a CEO of a major NGO that looks after our community. I've known her for many years, I understand. Her name is Neelam Sahota, and she's the CEO of Diversity. Neelam, you're most welcome in our program. How are you doing?
I'm very good. Thank you, Shashmaji.
Now, I mentioned that I've known you for a long time. I guess you have known me longer.
Yes, absolutely. You're the definition of our childhood. I guess, as a child growing up, in the 1970s,
Yes.
your very first office was very nearby to my parents' place.
In Vancouver.
In Vancouver, IT Productions, just off of Boundary and Hastings.
Wow,
and both
you go back so many years.
Yes, and both my sister and I volunteered at your office back then, and we grew up watching you.
You know, Neelam, your generation, which happens to be my son's generation as well, is a generation that we're very proud of, because you guys were born and brought up here, and you've retained your Indianness, if I may say so,
Yes.
and are very proud Canadians.
Yes.
Now, you are a CPA and then CGA. Can you explain that to me, please?
Sure. So it's an accounting profession.
Okay.
CPA stands for Chartered Professional Accountants.
Okay.
And it's a national designation. And however, that was just recently put together about the last, I want to say about 6 or 7 years ago.
Right.
Prior to then, it was 3 individual professions, CGAs, CMAs, and CAs, that got merged into one.
Okay.
So when I received my designation back in 2001, it was CGAs, and so that's Certified General Accountants. So it's just an industry acronym that they use to define that you've gone through the Canadian process of being a chartered professional accountant.
So were you always interested in numbers?
I want to say numbers came naturally to me, for
Yeah.
sure. So I think very early on, I laugh. One of my sort of odd toys that I played with when I was a child, in my childhood, was a cash register. And so there's so many photos of me with this darn cash register. So I always say that it was almost ironic that I was going to go into something with numbers.
Right.
And yeah, I've always enjoyed working with numbers, but
Right.
I think I definitely enjoy working with people more, and so I think that's kind of leads me to where I am today.
So Diversity is an NGO, right?
Yes.
Now, let's talk a little bit about diversity. I want to come back to your childhood because I want to hear about the cash register as well. That's going to be an interesting story. Diversity is a very well-known organization in Surrey Delta, right?
Yes.
So when was it formed, and how did you become a part of it?
So it goes back a long time in this community, so over 40 years.
Wow.
Its origins from a larger organization called ISS of BC, which is Immigrant
Right.
Serving Society of BC, Immigrant
Right.
Services Society of BC. And back almost 40 years ago, of course, Surrey was just starting to become a city back
Yes.
then. And with some of our newcomer populations coming back then, there was a lot of sort of civil unrest during that time period. So they decided to open a campus out in Surrey.
Okay.
And that was called Surrey Delta ISS. So we're an
Right.
arm of that organization.
Okay.
And then that organization they renamed it in 2007 to Diversity Community Resources Society.
Right, which makes sense.
Which again, it's a play on words,
Yeah.
a diverse city.
Yeah,
and
that's
so they
right.
merged it together, diversity. And it was, like I said, it was formed in 1978.
Wow.
And we just celebrated our 40th anniversary last year.
That's
and
right.
we were honored to have you as our keynote speaker there.
It was beautiful. It was just amazing to see such vibrant people attracted to this and associated with it.
Yes.
How did you get interested in diversity?
So I started doing a little bit of research on what were sort of the big organizations that were in our city shortly after I had my third child.
Oh, wow.
And I was looking into I was looking into meaningful employment, so something that would be worth it for me to leave my 3 children and to go back into the workforce. So they were starting to get into school, and I was sort of ready to start looking back at how could I contribute my time. And it just so happened to me, I drove by one of their offices, and their logo really stuck to me. So if you take a look at their logo, it's four faces, but they're speaking to each other. And so I thought, oh, I wonder what this is about. And I went home, Googled it up, and I found out, exactly what they do, and it resonated with everything that I've always wanted to do. And so I applied in, and I went through a traditional route where I had looked for sort of a finance-related position. They didn't have any opening, so it was unsolicited. It wasn't like I was responding to a certain ad. I knew that if the timing was right, something would possibly happen, and I just sort of put it out there and kept my fingers crossed. And then lo and behold, they called me about 6 months later, and they had a part-time opening as a finance manager. And I went in and interviewed, and the rest is history, really, from there. So I went in from a part-time finance manager, quickly grew into a full-time one, quickly went into a director of finance role. Very shortly after, turned into their chief financial officer. And then in 2013, their chief executive officer. So there's my story.
That's a beautiful story. It is amazing because our young women are so smart, and sometimes I feel that we don't give them enough credit for being so smart. I mean, you guys, when you were growing up, I'm sure we will hear about this, that you went through not an identity crisis, but identity questioning. Am I an Indian? Am I a Canadian? What is Canadian? What is Indian? And yet, you come out of all that mess and you make a place for yourself in a world which is chosen by your parents. And you were just born here, right? I want to take a very short commercial break and come back and talk to you about your childhood, your mom and dad, your family, because I see some beautiful pictures around here. And there is a tree that is about your ancestry that I would like to talk about as well. Neelam Sahota is our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Women in Focus. Our Woman in Focus today is Neelam Sahota. So Neelam, you were born here. Tell me about your parents. When did they come to Canada?
So my parents came to Canada in 1969.
Wow.
Sorry, I err on that. Actually, I think they came in a few years earlier than that. They got married in 1969 in Canada.
In Canada.
In Canada.
Wow.
And
so one of the earlier families then.
Yes, definitely one of the earlier families. And it was really interesting to sort of see what Canada looked like back then, and when they got married here, and things look so different than what they are now, obviously. And then I came along as their first child in 1973.
Wow.
And then followed by my sister a couple of years later, and then 4 years later, my brother. So we're a family of 3.
Isn't that beautiful? So growing up, mom and dad, traditional or not very traditional?
Very traditional.
Very traditional.
Very traditional.
Okay, so no boyfriend, girlfriend bringing home?
Absolutely not. I think my dad would have had a heart attack.
So brought up as a Gursik?
I want to say not as a Gursik, but religion was very, very important to us. That was one of the things that connected us together. We would pray together. I learned to read and write Punjabi. Going to the Gurdwara, learning Punjabi was a big part of my childhood. We were never sort of strict by the book Gursikhi, but religion was always a source of strength for us and connectivity for our family.
Now you've been interested in finding out about your ancestors, and we're going to take a picture of that and show it. You've got a tree, and then you've gone back how many generations?
Well, from my Daddi ji side of the family, we've gone back 13 generations.
Wow.
Yes.
And so what sort of history have you learned about them, and where are they from?
Well, certainly the tree is both the representative of my husband's side of the family, so his ancestors and my ancestors as well too. Hopefully as a way to pass on our story to my children.
Yes.
And I guess I wanted to just kind of get a sense of, who some of these folks were. And I think in a way, I felt like I started it too late because a lot of, our elders have sort of passed on in our family, but it was still neat to collect whatever stories I could and put that together. And it was a journey. I want to say it took over almost 2 years to find some of the names. And of course, with the Caucasian, if you're from that population, there's a lot of websites that are out there like Ancestry.com and whatnot. But there isn't something similar like this for our cultures.
No.
And in terms of keeping history and background on that, it was very limited. I certainly benefited from my Dadaji's side of the family that were very, very good at keeping records. And so a lot of the information I got were from his diaries and from
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, so from some of our elders that were still in our families.
So would you interview them and write down stuff?
I was pestering people for the longest time. So either my in-laws to go on a bit of a hunt with their relatives to find out their backgrounds, and then on my side as well too, I'd suddenly be questioning. And it was funny because sometimes the recollections were a little bit different with the older generation. And
our memories are what we, that's our truth.
Yes.
And it's not necessarily the person who's next to us.
Sure.
They've gone through the same thing. It's not their truth.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So it seems like that you've come from a household that was very loving and very, gave you compassion and a desire to find out more about your background.
Yes.
So growing up, getting into accounting, the cash register.
Yes.
Who had the cash register and where did you get it from?
I have no idea where it was from, but it was one of those children's sort of toy registers.
Okay.
It's like a little toy.
Right.
And I think I was just fascinated with it. Of course I've had the dolls and I had, other things in there, but two sort of odd toys that I picked up from my photos looking back in my childhood were this cash register and this little microphone that I used to always either sing into or I used to say, things into. So there's a lot of photos on that, and that just caught my eye when I was looking through photos saying, well, those are not really your everyday toys that you would give to your children.
So growing up, meeting your husband,
yes,
was that arranged or did you sort of meet him, was it love marriage? So there's a twinkle in my eye.
Yeah,
while I'm asking.
you know what, it was an introduced marriage.
Oh, it was, okay.
It was introduced in the sense that our families knew each other.
Oh, okay.
So there's a lovely story behind
Yes.
it. Both our grandparents, like our grandmothers, knew each other. I believe back in Punjab, they were connected and they knew of each other. And because there was a limited amount of immigrants back in the 70s when we were growing up, they lived on the same street. And again, rumor has it, I don't know, I wouldn't recollect this. My husband and I are about a month and a half apart.
No kidding.
And so my now mother-in-law and my mom were both visiting their moms because again, shortly after birth, they were visiting their moms. And rumor has it that was sort of our first introduction. And we never met growing up. Well, I heard that the grandmothers were whispering something of the sort. And then all the years passed by. We never grew up together or anything, but I certainly grew up with, his side of the family were also in North Burnaby where my parents were. Again, the population there of Indians was limited. So we kind of all knew each other. And then it just came to be, one of his mammajis and mammijis were doing sort of a kirtan together, and it happened to be on my birthday actually. So I wasn't really going to go first, and I did. And then I think somehow or another the grandmothers resurrected that talk. we got convinced into meeting each other, and the rest is history.
Isn't that just beautiful? So North Burnaby probably where there used to be a old Hindu temple nearby.
An old Hindu temple nearby, and the IT productions nearby.
That's right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll take credit for that a little bit.
Oh, you can do that.
Let's take a short break, and I want to come back to your lovely family. You've got 3 kids.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about that and the,
Sure.
and the chess board. Do you know how to play chess?
Absolutely not.
But it belongs. It belongs in the family. Look at it; it's so beautiful.
Thank you. I can give you the background on that one.
I would love to learn about that, but we'll
Sure.
take a short break.
Great.
Neelam is our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Women in Focus. Our Woman in Focus today is Neelam Sahota. So Neelam, so you met this guy and you'd known, and the story is that you were destined to be together, so on and so forth. So you married him, and what does he do?
So my husband's name is Jeet. Well, his name is Amarjeet, but we go by Jeet.
Jeet, okay.
Yeah, he's definitely your IT guy. He's a project manager.
Wow.
With BC Housing.
Beautiful.
Yes.
So then you both got together and moved to Surrey? Or when did you move to Surrey?
So I moved to Surrey when I got married.
Okay.
So Jeet was already here, and his family was here, and so I moved over in 1998 to Surrey.
Lovely.
Yes.
And right away had children, or did you wait?
We had children 2 years later after we got married. So in 2000 we welcomed our son, Savik. Yes. And then in 2002, I had my daughter Nimi, and in 2004, I had my daughter Simi. So I've got 1 son and 2 daughters.
That's beautiful. So now, just before you met him, you were working.
Yes, I was working.
So where were you working? So once you finished your cash registering and did your CPA.
Yes.
So what did you do? What was the very first job?
So I actually had not finished my CPA yet. I had finished my bachelor's degree of business administration at SFU.
Okay.
Started working, ironically, at BC Housing, where my husband is today.
Right.
That was my sort of first professional job post graduation from SFU. And I was working at BC Housing and still doing my CPA at the same time, because you're required to work full time, gain experience, and then do night classes. So that's what I was doing, and I actually didn't graduate or didn't finish my CPA until after I had my son.
Oh wow!
Yes.
So that process, studying and having a child, was it difficult?
Oh my God, beyond difficult.
Really?
Yes, he was not an easy child growing up, and so I had a lot of sleepless nights, and I think I had my last 2 courses ready, sort of doing those while I was on maternity leave.
Right.
And some evenings I felt like giving up.
I'm glad you didn't.
No, I'm glad I didn't either.
You had a feeling that your parents wanted you to be in a certain profession.
I mean, sure, I think as sort of typical sort of Indian parents, even from the grandparents, the first sort of thing they dangle in front of you is, are you going to be a lawyer? Are you going to be a doctor? Usually it's doctor. And I think that was certainly my dadaji's. I would get his correspondence in letters when we'd correspond back and forth in Punjabi.
Right.
And he'd be asking, are you on your way to become a doctor?
Are you like that with your kids?
No, completely not. Because I think we grew up in a way that we felt like we were sort of confined to a certain structure. And mind you, we had a lot of leeway. I can speak for myself. I had a lot of leeway from my parents. I kind of guided myself. But with our children, we definitely leave the road open for them to discover what's their passion.
And what is their passion?
Oh my God, I've got a little bit of everything here. So I've got my older 2 definitely. First of all, no one wants to follow in sort of a business footsteps or an IT footsteps. So it's nothing that mom or dad are doing right now.
Of course not.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I've got the older 2 that want to do something or another related with sciences.
Right.
And then my youngest one, I always say, watch out, world. She's definitely Miss Social Justice Activist.
No kidding.
We'll see where things go with her, but
Wow.
she's very passionate about, certain, again, social issues.
Yeah.
And so, we'll see where life takes them.
Isn't that just lovely? In your profession, do you have to look after people who come from other countries, like for example the Syrian refugees and
Yes.
people like that?
Absolutely. Of course, I myself, in my role, am not client-facing. So as a CEO, again, we put framework and policies in place.
Okay.
We work with various levels of government in administering sort of contracts out, which is services for newcomers.
Okay.
But we see people from every source country you can
Right.
think of.
Wow.
We have services in over 84 languages.
84.
More than 84 languages. I did not even know that there were more than 84 languages before I
Spoken
joined.
here,
Yes,
right.
before we joined at Diversity, spoken at Diversity.
Wow.
Yes,
Isn't that just beautiful?
absolutely.
And for you to look after it and take it forward,
Yes.
that is amazing. But thank you for being a woman in focus today. We didn't talk about the chess. I want to
Yes.
find out why is there a chessboard in your room here?
So it was just,
You play chess?
I don't play chess.
Okay. So now the story becomes even interesting.
Okay, and so it was a gift that I had given to my husband,
Who's a chess player?
who's a chess player, and he also liked Greek mythology. As you can see, the figures are mythological characters, and so, I saw this, and I thought it would be a great conversation piece, which it is now, as you can see. And I think it was just, it was just an opportunity to, give him something that, that's his, he loves mythology, and he, likes strategy. And so I always say that that's an important part of our life.
I wish he was here. I would ask him. There's
Yeah.
one piece that is placed in an odd place.
Yes,
It's the tower.
yes.
So what would be the significance of all that? That would have been interesting to ask him.
I wish I could tell you.
Okay, not to worry. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Neelam has been our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back.